The worst thing my brother ever said to me happened at a party I helped plan. It was supposed to be his night. Backyard full of people. Music from a cheap speaker that kept buzzing between songs. The smell of barbecue smoke hanging in the warm Texas air. And me standing by the patio table holding a glass of soda I didn't even want. Honestly, I almost didn't go. You ever get that feeling walking into a room where everyone's smiling, but something about it just feels off, like the air is wrong somehow? I swear I felt it the second I stepped into that backyard. But Connor had asked me to help organize the party. Graduation from high school. Big deal. His friends were there, neighbors, some family. So, yeah, I showed up. For a second, everything felt normal. Connor laughing with his friends near the fire pit. My dad sitting in a lawn chair with a blanket over his legs. He still got tired easily after the stroke. Laura was moving through the guests with a plate of food, smiling at everyone. That polite smile she always wore. The one that made people think she was the sweetest woman alive. I was refilling drinks on the table when Connor suddenly tapped a spoon against his glass. Clink, clink. The sound cut right through the music. Everyone turned. Connor stood up on the little wooden step by the deck railing like he was about to give a speech. His friends started cheering. Speech, someone yelled. Connor grinned. That lazy grin he had when he thought he was being funny. For real, though, he said, "I just want to say something." People quieted down. I leaned against the table, half listening. Honestly, I figured he was about to thank our dad, or his friends. Something normal. Connor looked around the yard. Then his eyes landed on me, and he laughed. Honestly, he said, "I've been disgusted by Chloe from the beginning." For a second, no one reacted. Someone near the grill chuckled like it was a joke. A couple of his friends laughed too, unsure. But Connor didn't stop. He pointed at me. "Yeah, I mean it," he said. "She always acts like she owns the place, like she's better than the rest of us." My fingers tightened around the plastic cup. The ice inside shifted with a quiet crack. I looked over at Laura. She stepped forward quickly, putting a hand on Connor's arm. "Connor," she said softly, "that's enough." Her voice sounded concerned, but her face wasn't. She was smiling. Just a little. That's the moment something inside my chest went cold, because people say stupid things at parties, especially teenagers. It happens. But that smile told me something else. This hadn't come out of nowhere. And standing there in that backyard with everyone watching me, I suddenly realized something that honestly should have hit me years earlier. Connor didn't start hating me that night. It had started long before the party, long before he stood on that step and said those words. Back when he was still small enough to fall asleep on my shoulder. Connor used to fall asleep on my shoulder when he was little. I keep thinking about that now, which is kind of stupid considering what he said at the party. But memories don't really ask permission before they show up. When Connor was born, I was 9 years old. My mom had died the year before. The house had been quiet for months after that, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel too loud. Then Laura moved in. A year later, Connor arrived, screaming in a hospital blanket. Dad was working double shifts back then. Bills, stress, everything falling apart. Laura had a job at a dental clinic across town. She said the hours were exhausting. Most evenings she didn't get home until late. And when she did, she usually looked too tired to deal with a toddler. So, a lot of the time, Connor ended up with me. I didn't think of it as raising him back then. I just thought I was helping. I remember one night when he was maybe 4, a thunderstorm was tearing through the neighborhood. The power flickered and the house went dark. A few seconds later, I heard small footsteps in the hallway. "Chloe," he said, climbing into my bed. "The sky is breaking. It's just thunder." I told him. He grabbed my arm anyway. "Stay here. I'm not going anywhere," I said, and I didn't. Stuff like that happened all the time. Homework at the kitchen table. Me trying to explain fractions while he chewed on the end of a pencil. I don't get it. He'd groan. You do. I'd say, you're just being lazy. Am not. Yeah, you are. Then he'd laugh and shove my notebook off the table. Normal kid stuff. Laura used to stand in the doorway watching sometimes. You're good with him, she told me once. I guess. I said, he needs someone steady. She said, I believed her back then. Honestly, I thought we were on the same team. Connor used to call me something that made Laura laugh the first time she heard it. Second mom. He said it proudly. Chloe's my second mom. Laura smiled when he said that. But later, when we were alone in the kitchen, she leaned against the counter and looked at me in a different way. Just remember, she said quietly, you're his sister, not his mother. I shrugged it off. At the time, it sounded like a harmless reminder. One of those adult comments that doesn't mean much, but thinking back now, that might have been the first crack in everything, because somewhere between those nights of homework and thunderstorms and stupid arguments about math, Connor slowly stopped seeing me the way he used to, and the strange part is, I didn't notice when it started happening. The change didn't happen all at once. Connor hit high school and suddenly everything about me annoyed him. It started small. One afternoon, he was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling on his phone while I was trying to finish a work email. You still living here? He said without looking up. Yeah. I said, last time I checked. He shrugged. Just asking. Stuff like that. Little comments that felt weird but not serious enough to fight over. A few weeks later, he walked into the living room while I was folding laundry. You ever think about getting your own place? He asked. I looked up. I have an apartment, I said. I'm here helping Dad. Connor leaned against the wall. Laura says you stay here a lot. Your dad had a stroke, I said. Someone needs to help. He nodded slowly like he didn't quite believe me. That's when I started noticing something. Connor kept saying Laura's name in the middle of these conversations. Laura says. Laura thinks. Laura noticed. One night he came into the kitchen while I was making coffee. You act like you run the house, he said. I stared at him. What? That's what Laura says. He replied. I felt something twist in my chest. Connor, I said carefully, this is your dad's house. He crossed his arms. Exactly. The tone in his voice was new, hard, like he was repeating something he'd already decided was true. A few days later, I overheard Laura talking to him in the hallway. Her voice was soft. Sweetheart, she said, you have to protect yourself. From Chloe, Connor asked. I didn't say that, she replied quickly. But sometimes people want things that aren't really theirs. There was a long pause. Then Connor said quietly, I know. I stood in the kitchen holding the edge of the counter, listening to that conversation through the wall. And that was probably the moment I should have realized something was seriously wrong. But I didn't. Not yet. Dad's stroke happened on a Tuesday morning. Laura called me while I was at work. Andrew collapsed. She said. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. The ambulance is taking him to St. David's. I left my office before the meeting even ended. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. Dad was awake when I got there, pale but talking. Connor stood near the bed, scrolling on his phone. He's stable, Laura said quietly. Dad looked at me and tried to smile. Hey, kid, he said. Didn't mean to cause a scene? Don't joke, I said. You scared everyone. The doctor said it was a minor stroke, but Dad would need help for a while. No stress. No long days. Someone had to handle things at the house. Dad looked straight at me. Chloe, I'm gonna need your help with the paperwork for a bit, he said. Of course, I replied. Laura nodded politely. You've always been good with that kind of thing. So I started coming by every afternoon. Bills, insurance forms, medical paperwork, the kind of boring stuff Dad normally handled himself. One evening, I sat at the dining table going through a stack of envelopes. Late sunlight was coming through the kitchen window. The house was quiet except for the television in the living room. Most of the mail was normal. Then I saw an envelope that didn't fit, a thick one from a bank in Austin. I opened it. Inside was a statement, home equity line of credit. Approved amount $95,000. I stared at the page for a second before standing up. Dad was in the living room watching the news. "Dad," I said, holding the papers, "did you take out a loan on the house?" He muted the television. "What loan?" "This one." He adjusted his glasses and started reading the document slowly. His forehead tightened. "I don't remember signing this," he said. My stomach dropped. "Your signature's right there." Dad flipped to the authorization page. "Look at the date," he said. I did. 6 months earlier. Dad tapped the page. "That's the week I was in the hospital for heart monitoring," he said. 3 nights in ICU. I remembered it clearly. "There's no way I signed anything then," he said. Connor walked in from the kitchen holding a bag of chips. "What's going on?" Dad held up the statement. "Apparently I borrowed $95,000 and forgot about it." Connor barely glanced at the paper. "Maybe you did," he said. Dad gave him a look. "You don't forget a loan against your house." Laura appeared in the doorway, drying her hands with a towel. "What's wrong?" I held up the statement. "Did you know about this?" She walked over and looked at the page. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she shrugged lightly. "Andrew handled most of the finances," she said. Dad looked back down at the paper. "I don't remember this," he said quietly. No one spoke after that. But sitting there with that document in my hand, something about the whole thing stopped feeling like a mistake. It started feeling like someone had counted on us not looking too closely. 2 days later, I took the loan papers to Daniel Foster. His office sat above a small insurance building downtown. Same place he'd worked for years. The hallway smelled like old carpet and copier toner. Daniel had known my family since before my mom died. He stood when I walked in. "Chloe Parker," he said. "It's been a while. I wish this was a friendly visit," I replied. I placed the folder on his desk. "Dad says he didn't sign that." Daniel adjusted his glasses and opened the file. He read slowly, page by page, the way careful lawyers do. For a while, he didn't say anything. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Home equity line of credit," he said. $95,000. "Yeah." He tapped the signature page. "This was authorized electronically," he said, "which means the bank verified it through your father's email and digital login." I frowned. "But Dad was in the hospital that week." Daniel nodded. "That matters," he said. "But right now, we don't assume fraud yet." He turned toward his computer and pulled up additional documents connected to the loan. "These are the transaction records the bank attached to the statement," he explained. A series of transfers appeared on the screen. My chest tightened. "Where did the money go?" I asked. Daniel zoomed in on the last transfer. Most of the funds were moved into a brokerage account. He paused. "The account holder is Laura Parker." My stomach dropped. "And Connor is listed as a secondary name on the account." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "That has to be some kind of mistake," I said quietly. Daniel didn't rush to answer. "It might be," he said. "Or it might simply mean the loan proceeds were transferred into an account she manages." I rubbed my forehead. Connor wouldn't even know how to set something like that up. "Probably not." Daniel agreed. "But an adult in the household could." "Laura." The name didn't need to be said out loud. Daniel folded his hands on the desk. "Right now, the important thing is this." He said, "Your father says he doesn't remember authorizing the loan. The timeline puts him in the hospital. That gives us reason to ask questions." "What happens next?" I asked. "We request the authorization records from the bank," Daniel said. "Login history, verification steps, the full trail. And if it shows Dad never approved it," Daniel met my eyes. Then the bank will likely open a fraud investigation. The word sat heavy in the room. Fraud. I looked again at the screen. Laura Parker. Connor Parker. And suddenly that conversation I'd overheard in the hallway weeks earlier didn't sound so harmless anymore. Protect yourself. Now I was starting to understand what she had really meant. Daniel didn't rush anything. Before we accuse anyone, he said, we need context. 2 days later, he called me back to the office. I spoke with the bank. He said, and the account was opened 8 months ago. Laura Parker listed Connor as co-owner. My chest tightened. Connor knows about it. Daniel nodded once. I'm afraid so. I drove straight to the house after that. Connor was in the kitchen leaning against the counter, eating cereal straight from the box. You opened an investment account with Laura, I said. He didn't even look surprised. Yeah, you put $95,000 in it. Not me, he said. Mom handled that. I stepped closer. Connor, that money came from Dad's house. He rolled his eyes. Relax. Relax. You act like you own the place, he said. The same sentence from the party. My hands went cold. Connor, I said slowly. Dad didn't approve that loan. He stared at me like I was the one lying. That's not what Mom said. I let out a breath. What did Laura say? Connor crossed his arms. She said you were planning to sell the house after Dad got sick. I blinked. What she said, you were setting things up so you'd control everything. That's insane. Is it? Connor shot back. You're always here. Always handling the bills. Always making decisions. Because Dad asked me to help. Connor shook his head. You think you're smarter than everyone. I felt something crack inside my chest. Connor, I said quietly. I practically raised you. He shrugged. No one asked you to. The kitchen went silent except for the slow hum of the refrigerator. Connor tossed the empty cereal box into the trash. Mom just said I should protect myself. He added, protect yourself. The exact words I'd heard in the hallway weeks earlier. Standing there looking at him, I realized something that somehow hurt worse than the fraud. Connor honestly believed he was the victim. After that conversation with Connor, I stopped trying to argue. There was no point. When someone believes they're protecting themselves, every explanation sounds like an attack. The next morning, I went back to Daniel Foster's office. He listened while I told him what Connor had said. He believes Laura. I finished. Daniel nodded slowly. That's not unusual, he said. If she's been telling that story for a while, it becomes the truth in his mind. That I'm trying to take the house, I said. Daniel slid a folder toward me. Which is why we stay patient. He replied. Inside were the documents the bank had started sending over. Logan records, email confirmations, authorization steps connected to the loan. Daniel pointed to one page. The loan funds haven't been spent, he said. They're still sitting in the brokerage account. That's good, right. It helps, he said. If the bank opens a fraud review, frozen funds are easier to track. And Laura investigations take time, Daniel said. Right now, we gather facts. So that's what we did. I organized copies of Dad's financial records from the past year, bank statements, utility bills, anything showing how he normally handled money. Daniel requested the bank's login history tied to the loan authorization. Then something happened I wasn't expecting. One evening, I was walking down the hallway when I heard Laura speaking in the kitchen. Her voice was low, almost casual. She won't challenge it, Laura said. I stopped without meaning to. Connor answered from somewhere near the stairs. You sure? Of course, Laura replied. Once the house is transferred, Chloe won't have a claim to anything. My phone was already in my hand. I recorded the rest of the conversation before they noticed me. Later that night, I sent the file to Daniel. He called the next morning. That recording doesn't prove everything, he said, but it supports the timeline. For the investigation, yes. That afternoon, Laura knocked on my bedroom door. Chloe, she said warmly. Your father's feeling better? I thought we could have a small family dinner Friday. She smiled like nothing had happened. You should come. I looked at her for a moment. Then I nodded. I'll be there. Friday night the house felt strange. Not tense exactly, just arranged too carefully. Laura had set the table like it was a holiday dinner. Candles. The heavy plates Dad only used when guests came over. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic drifting through the kitchen. Dad sat at the head of the table looking tired but stronger than he had a week earlier. Nice to have everyone together again, he said. Connor dropped into the chair across from me and poured himself iced tea. Laura set the serving dish down in the center. Family dinners matter, she said lightly, especially after everything Andrew's been through. I nodded but didn't say much. Dinner started normally enough. Passing plates, small talk about the weather, Connor's graduation, Dad's recovery. Connor barely looked at me. Laura kept smiling. Halfway through the meal, she lifted her glass. I just want to say how proud I am of this family, she said. We've handled a difficult few weeks. Dad nodded. Connor muttered, Yeah. Laura turned toward me. And Chloe. Thank you for helping with your father's paperwork. Her voice sounded warm, almost gentle. I set my fork down. There's actually something I wanted to show everyone, I said. Connor looked up. Laura tilted her head. What is it? I stood and walked to the television on the wall. My laptop was already sitting on the cabinet below it. Dad frowned. Chloe. Just a minute. I connected the cable and the screen lit up. Connor leaned back in his chair. What is this? The first image appeared. A photo of Connor at 4 years old, sitting on the kitchen counter with pancake batter on his cheeks. He blinked. Where'd you find that old backup drive? I said. The next photo appeared. Connor asleep on the couch with his head on my shoulder. Then another. His first day of elementary school. Backpack bigger than he was. Laura shifted in her chair. Chloe, she said carefully, what's the point of this? Just stay with me for a second. The screen changed. The next image wasn't a photo. It was a document. Home equity line of credit. Approved amount $95,000. Connor sat forward. What's that? Dad squinted at the screen. That's the loan statement, he said quietly. Laura didn't move. I clicked again. Another page appeared. Bank transfer record. Destination account holder Laura Parker. Secondary name associated with the account, Connor Parker. Connor slowly turned toward his mother. Mom, Laura's voice tightened. Chloe, this is not the time for this. I pressed play. Laura's recorded voice filled the room. She won't challenge it. Connor's voice followed. You sure? Laura answered calmly in the recording. Of course. Once the house is transferred, Chloe won't have a claim. The room went silent. Connor stared at the screen. Then he looked at Laura. Mom, what is that? Laura stood up quickly. That recording is completely out of context. Dad pushed his chair back. What recording? He asked. I turned to him. The bank has already started reviewing the loan, I said. They're checking the authorization history. Laura's face lost color. Connor looked between us like the ground had shifted under him. Wait, he said. You're saying the loan wasn't real? I met his eyes. The loan is real, I said quietly. But Dad never approved it. Connor slowly turned back toward Laura. And for the first time that night, she didn't have an answer ready. No one spoke for several seconds. Connor kept staring at the television like the images might rearrange themselves if he looked long enough. Laura was the first to break the silence. This is ridiculous, she said sharply. Chloe is twisting everything. Dad slowly turned toward her. Laura, he said quietly, did you authorize that loan? She lifted her chin. Andrew, I was protecting our son. Dad frowned, protecting him from what Connor pushed his chair back a little. Mom, what is she talking about? Laura looked at him. I secured money for your future, she said. Your sister was preparing to control everything in this house. I finally spoke. That's not true. Connor turned toward me. You said you were handling Dad's finances. Because he asked me to. I said, after the stroke. Connor looked confused. That's not what Mom told me. I nodded slowly. I figured. The room felt heavy, like years of quiet assumptions were finally being dragged into the open. Connor rubbed both hands over his face. You said Chloe was planning to push us out, he said to Laura. Laura crossed her arms. She already runs this house. She replied, Look at tonight. She's humiliating us. Something inside me settled then. The anger I'd been carrying for weeks just faded. All that was left was exhaustion. Connor, I said softly. He looked up. When Mom died, you were 4, I said. He didn't answer. I walked you to school every morning for years. I helped you with homework. I stayed up with you during thunderstorms when you were scared. Connor's eyes dropped to the table. I skipped internships in college so I could stay close to home when Dad's business was struggling. I continued. He swallowed. I even sold my car a few years ago to help cover Dad's hospital bills. Connor's voice came out rough. I didn't know that. I know. I said. Laura stepped forward. Connor, she's manipulating you. Connor stood up suddenly. Stop! His voice shook. I believed you, he said to his mother. You told me Chloe was trying to take everything. Laura reached for his arm. I was trying to protect you. Connor slowly pulled away. No, he said quietly. Then he looked at me again. And for the first time in a long while, I saw the little brother I used to know still hiding somewhere behind his anger. Laura left that night. Not quietly. Chairs scraping. Her voice sharp and angry. You'll regret this, she said to Dad. Dad didn't yell. He just pointed toward the door. Leave, he said. Connor stood near the hallway, staring at the floor. When the door slammed, the house felt strangely empty. Dad looked exhausted. I trusted her, he muttered. I sat down slowly. So did we. Connor stayed standing for a while. Then he walked over and stopped a few feet from me. I messed this up, he said. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. You believed someone you trusted, I replied. That doesn't make it okay. No, I said. It doesn't. He nodded once. I'll fix it, he said. I didn't answer right away. Some things take longer than promises. 6 months later, Connor moved into a small apartment near Texas State University. Part-time job, classes, trying to figure himself out. We talk sometimes, not like before, but not like enemies either. The house is quieter now. Dad's health is improving. Life keeps moving. Honestly, if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's this: people can lie to you for years, but the truth always shows up eventually, usually when it hurts the most. And when it does, you get a choice. You can stay angry forever, or you can step forward and decide who you want to be after the damage. I'm still figuring that part out. If you've ever had family turn on you like this, I'd genuinely like to hear how you handled it. Stories like this aren't rare, and sometimes sharing them helps more than we expect.